Hi everyone, welcome to my session on whether you should build or buy AI. Hi everyone, I'm Steph Locke, CEO at Nightingale HQ. I'm a data scientist by trade and a Microsoft data platform and AI MVP. You'll be able to catch up with me after watching this session on Twitter, LinkedIn, or by email. So we're going to be talking about whether you want to buy or build artificial intelligence solutions. But firstly, let's benchmark what we mean by AI. So AI are computer systems that can perform typically 3 tasks. They aim to reason, so draw conclusions based on data or rules that have been provided. To understand, so can they work out what's in an image? Can they understand tone of voice? Can they work out what we are thinking and what the sentiment is with text? And finally, interaction. Can they provide conversation with humans to help humans get on with their job? So AI takes things beyond business intelligence, where we report on what happened, to start identifying what drives things to happen and provide new and interesting ways for people to interact with their computers. Things like live subtitling in PowerPoint. So if we're talking about making a business decision about whether in a given situation or at a more strategic level, you should be buying or building artificial intelligence, we need to think about the things that make up a business decision. Now, depending on how cynical and jaded you are, you might think that making a business decision is based on the egos of the people in the room, whatever is the new hotness, the different things in different departments, or who wants to grow their headcount more. I'd like to replace this set of considerations and give us a more value-oriented set. So first of all, thinking about where value is in the business, how the AI use case aligns to overall strategy, taking into account intellectual property considerations, working out what capabilities you will need an appetite to build up capabilities, and then compliance and ethics to make sure that what you build or buy is right for your business. So when we're talking about value, we have a couple of different mechanisms that we can use to think about how AI can impact our business and the way to frame the discussion as to whether we should be building or buying the solution. The first thing to think about is the bottom or top line in your business. So your bottom line is how much you spend. So the overheads, the staff, the cost of goods, and the top line is your revenue. That's how much your business earns. The gap between the top line and the bottom line is your profit. You can achieve profit by reducing your bottom line or increasing your top line. So when we're talking about building or buying AI, if we're thinking about what the AI solution will achieve, we should be able to say whether it decreases our overheads, thus reducing our bottom line, or giving us opportunity to make more profit, more sales. That would increase our top line. So if your business is looking to increase profitability from the existing customer base, perhaps you're in a mature market and you might be a big company in that space, you might want to look at reducing your overheads by reducing the cost of things like customer service, by automating some of the aspects, by improving how the systems perform, or you might look at increasing the revenue you can get from each customer, and that might be about using AI to improve upsell by better recommendations or adding new features that help keep customers. So when you're thinking about building or buying AI, you should be first of all thinking about what AI will achieve in terms of macro level value for the company. You can also think of value in terms of return on investment. For every pound you spend on either acquiring a solution and implementing it or building it from scratch, how much possible money can you make from that solution? So for instance, if you spend each year £200,000 on recruitment costs and you buy a HR CV screening automation tool, and that reduces your HR costs down to £50,000. If you spend less than £150,000, you will have broken even and completely returned your investment in the first year. If, however, you only reduced your spend by £50,000 and it costs you £200,000 in staff time to deliver that tool into your system, then it's going to take you 4 years to get a return on that investment. So thinking about it in terms of cost that it takes to buy and implement or build and implement, and how you measure that in return on the investment is important and a great way to help you decide. You can think of value in terms of your strengths and weaknesses in your greater business marketplace. So if you are a customer relationship management software like Microsoft Dynamics or HubSpot or Salesforce, can whatever solution you do differentiate you from the competition? If you do things like auto-completing emails, recommending sales strategies, or hoovering up and creating tasks from emails so that salespeople do things more quickly, then you can differentiate from the competition. If those types of tasks do not have off-the-shelf solutions that you can easily buy, then building those would be the only way to go. And then the other thing to consider is not just the short-term gain of buying or building the solution, but also what is the longer-term value to your organization, to your customers, and to your team. If you buy a solution now, will that be maintained? Will it continue to add value? If you build solutions and you start gaining a capability, will it produce a snowball effect to help your business be able to add more value from similar solutions in future? So value is all about how is this going to improve our business. We should also think about how artificial intelligence solutions align to our business. So this is both in terms of overall business strategy, but also in terms of technology adoption strategy. So overall, how does your business like to do things? Do you like to be seen as the cutting edge business, or do you want to use things once they've become a commodity? This is an ideal way of helping you balance whether you should build or buy AI. If you build, you might be at the cutting edge of a space. Whereas if you buy, that technology is already becoming a commodity, is more resilient, more and easier to acquire and implement, but doesn't help push the boat out necessarily. We can start thinking about whether AI features align with where you want to go strategically. If AI might be a core part of the product, so it might be the thing that sets it apart from competitor products, then buying that capability means that probably there's another competitor in the marketplace offering it, or could very easily buy that same solution and have a product that does the same thing. Building the AI inside that product might give you a stronger competitive advantage and align more with how you want to build the product. Contrast that with wanting to add a new feature to the app, like a face login solution. That's something that people expect in a broad range of scenarios and is no longer a competitive differentiator. In that sort of sense, it is better to align a buy strategy because that enables you to spend resources on more of the core product rather than these peripheral features. And finally, thinking about alignment with your broader artificial intelligence strategy. As a company, do you want to be AI ready, able to build and integrate artificial intelligence into your overall way of doing things? Or is AI a technology to be used where applicable? What is right for your business differs and can be considered on many of the factors we're discussing at this build or buy sort of question. Another consideration for whether you should be building or buying an artificial intelligence solution to a challenge is around intellectual property. So intellectual property is the knowledge that is able to make your business money. It is the things that we add copyrights to, that we make patents for, that we get trademarks for. They're the special sauce, there's Coke's secret recipe. These are the things that help set our business apart. And most businesses will have an approach to intellectual property. This could be, we want to build everything and we want to have all the IP and make as many patents as you can. Or it could be, we want to focus on our core products. This is where we're going to invest in our IP. And for everything else, we're really happy to buy in solutions. Or it could be, we just want to get to market. We want to be a different company from our competitors by being speedier and more nimble. In which case, you might not generate as much IP, but you're gaining customers. So you should have an IP stance in your company, and when you're thinking at a given solution level or at a strategy level, you can be thinking about how the project or solution itself would contribute to your company's intellectual property. And the other area that IP is really valuable for and something to be particularly considering for is if you're a small startup or scale-up organization and thinking about investors. Intellectual property is always a valuable asset, but it is particularly attractive when seeking investments. Particularly as the tech team, the capabilities of the team to be able to deliver AI solutions, whether building or buying, is probably one of the biggest things that you need to think about. First up is, what can you currently do? If your data and software engineer teams are all about building relational databases, reports, and create, read, update, delete applications, you might not right now have the capability to build artificial intelligence solutions. You might be able to buy them. So for instance, using the cognitive services APIs from Microsoft to perform text analytics. You might be able to do that because your software engineers can do those API calls. But if you don't have existing staff to do that, then building a solution is probably the best approach. So you need to understand where you are and also where you kind of want to go. So if you want to be able to build your own AI solutions, you have kind of two approaches. One is you outsource, so you talk to a consultant and they build you a solution, maybe in partnership with your team, and perform skills transfer. Or you hire people who have the requisite skills and build up your capability that way. So if you outsource to a consultant, usually they have the necessary skills to advise you on what is the appropriate implementation and can get started very quickly with it. Common drawbacks are it's quite costly because a consultant is an expert who knows exactly what they're doing and you pay for that privilege. And it can be that the knowledge stays primarily in the consultant and it can be difficult to maintain the solution once it is live inside your business. On the hiring side, and we're talking both permanent employees and contractors here, there are pros and cons to this approach as well. So hiring people has a long recruitment cycle typically, and then a long productivity ramp as people learn the domain. And if you hire juniors, they've got technical skills that they need to acquire. If you hire seniors, then you need to spend time with them working out what technologies other people in your teams need to be educated in for working together. You also need to think about the peripheral skills. So if somebody is a machine learning expert, they would be very good at building a model, but they might not be very good at building that model and getting it into production. Your environment might use Kubernetes, or it might use a traditional N-tier architecture of database, C#, website kind of solution. Having the skills necessary in the team for that solution to get into production might need extra people to be involved or extra people to be hired or outsourced to. So you can't just go from working with Excel spreadsheets as a company to building your own AI solutions overnight. You need to think about the ongoing overhead of your built or bought AI solution. If you buy an AI solution, other people are responsible for making sure it stays top quality. They're going to have the data scientist regularly retraining it, developing new features for it, and testers validating that it meets requirements. So if you're thinking about building an AI solution, you have to plan for not just building it, but also maintaining it. And then every AI solution that you subsequently build, you have to continue stacking the maintenance overhead of those solutions. On the buy side, you have to think about your developers or other people who are responsible for implementing the solution and how they will account for breaking changes in APIs, product updates. Typically, it will be lower overheads for a bought AI solution. And the final thing to think about is what's called the bus factor. The very grim, if I got hit by a bus today, could work carry on without me? If you hire a solo data scientist or machine learning engineer, you don't have any redundancy in place for if they go on holiday, if they're ill, if they go and get a new job. So you're very brittle if you built AI solutions with just one or two key members of staff compared to having a team of developers and using an off-the-shelf API to build some AI feature. So when we're talking about totaling up your costs, usually for hiring your AI team to build AI solutions for you, you can't really just hire a single data scientist or machine learning engineer to get the job done. Long term, you need at least two so that you have effectively a failover if one moves on. So when we're talking about the capabilities of your team or your wider organization for whether you should build or buy AI, you need to be thinking about what you have existing skill set wise, not just inside AI and machine learning, but in peripheral skills like data management, software engineering, and business intelligence. And you need to think about what the ongoing costs are going to be for hiring new staff to build solutions and manage those solutions going forward, and whether hiring or outsourcing is a good approach, typically when you're thinking about the build AI approach. Determining whether to build or buy an AI solution also includes compliance considerations. Now, this varies by industry and business, but some of the things that you need to think about are areas like oversight. If you have an AI solution, you need to be able to monitor that it is doing the right thing and doing it appropriately, particularly in situations where you're a highly regulated industry, or even just when you're making automated decisions about people. How do you make sure that the solution is built appropriately? And this is partly risk appetite as well. If you buy an AI solution, your oversight might be through the due diligence process of buying that AI solution and making sure that the company or vendor that sold you the AI solution continues to warranty it and maintains any ISO, GDPR, HIPAA, PCI types of compliance requirements. If you're building it in-house, how are you going to make sure that it complies to quality standards, that it was built appropriately and uses your data in a way that you consider that is authorized? So you need to think about the oversight involved in building or buying the solution. You need to think about your GDPR requirements. So I mentioned earlier about automated decision making. If you make a decision automatically about a person, so this could be whether they get a loan, or even which products do you recommend to them, you might need you will need to be able to explain how you arrived at that decision. In the case of buying an AI solution, coming back to something like cognitive services and the personalizer product from Microsoft, which alters what content or product somebody would see based on factors about them, you can get only some information back about how that decision was arrived at, because of course the vendor is not going to want to give you all their secret sauce. They're not going to want to give you the model to tell people how it was built, because that removes their commercial advantage. However, you can say, well, the API returned this score, and this score, and so we made these decisions. So it gives you potentially quite an easy explanation, but it might not be considered robust enough by your compliance teams. On the build AI side, you have full insight into how the data was collected, refined, and used to produce a model, and hopefully you'll be logging the results of any AI-based decisions, so you can say what the outputs were. There has been recent endeavors in some areas of machine learning, like neural nets, to make them more explainable. And that is really useful for helping you convey what models, what AI solutions did to arrive at the decision. You need to think about your broader compliance with various legal situations. So there's been an increase in legislation against, for instance, public sector use of facial recognition. So we need to be conscious that what we're doing is not breaking any relevant laws, and not just in our home territory, but if you make an app that is available globally, you want to make sure that you stay in compliance. You need to think about any regulators. So certain regulators are much more wary of artificial intelligence than others. Like with all current emerging technologies, we are building things at a much faster pace than we can ensure that our legislation keeps up with. So some regulators are going to be quite uncertain about the use of artificial intelligence in some areas of your business. So buying an AI solution for maybe a peripheral task, so for instance, if you're a pharmaceutical organization, buying a HR AI solution is probably going to be less of a problem to your regulators than being a mortgage financial services organization and building your own bespoke deep learning model to determine what prices somebody gets for their mortgage. So you can be thinking about it in terms of what balances your compliance with your ability to get it approved or publicly accepted. And this can also be part of your risk appetite. So you might be that mortgage company with a regulator that is a bit wary, and your risk appetite might push you to challenge the regulators to be more accepting of artificial intelligence. So there's a lot that you should be thinking about around compliance when you're deciding whether you should be building or buying an AI solution to a problem or opportunity in your business. Last, but certainly not least, is the ethical considerations of the AI solution to solve a business problem or opportunity, and where the considerations lie when building or buying a tool to help. An important area to be thinking about is, particularly if you're building an AI solution, is what is your historic data bias? So I've worked in organizations that had ended up with encoded rules around things like same-sex marriages that they were having to put specific changes in to fix because of legacy processes and assumptions from being quite a long-lived old organization. Processes change all the time, and this really impacts our collected data. And when we build solutions over biased data, we enshrine that bias in the models that we end up building. So if our data is fundamentally biased, building a solution on it would not necessarily be ethical, and we would need to either look for external data sets that can supplement our solution, or possibly buy an AI product that doesn't have that bias in. But we also, when we buy AI, we are also at risk of general bias issues. So this is quite a big reason why certain facial recognition solutions are problematic, because the data collected and the bias was towards kind of Anglo-centric countries, and many of the images were mostly trained on white people. And as a result, the facial recognition solutions perform badly with other groups of people, and that can lead to them getting distorted recommendations. So we do need to be careful that not only our data is relatively unbiased, but if we're buying a solution, that solution doesn't have implicit bias itself. We ought to be thinking about misuse. So with AI solutions for things like self-driving cars, how are we going to make sure that people do not manipulate the AI to end up at causing collisions and things like that? It's the classic Ben Parker, with great power comes great responsibility. If we're building a solution, we need to be thinking about how it could be misused. We also need to be thinking about internal awareness of some of these ethical considerations. The sort of HR CV scanner type of solution that I mentioned as earlier potential AI use cases also has to be, you have to be aware of things like the historic bias, and people need to be educated on these sort of considerations, because as an example, Google built a CV screener based on their past applications and who had been approved, and the results qualified good candidates as people named Jared or played water polo. So making sure that people inside the business who are using the AI solutions or will interact with them or support people using them, they need to be aware of many of these considerations so that more eyes can be watching out for ethical issues. We also need to think about public awareness as well. So does the public consider the use of AI to be appropriate. If you buy an AI solution and it's pay as you go, if you find public perception says that that solution isn't very good, you can very easily stop building it and have a lower cost than if you'd have built the solution and you still have to kind of maintain it for some reason. So we should be thinking about the public perception and also the public perception as to who is safe to have that data. If the NHS produced a COVID-19 risk model and companies securely use that, public awareness is probably going to be more positive of the ethical considerations of that than companies building their own COVID-19 risk API and using that internally because of the medical data that is essentially being involved. So we need to think about the public awareness of where we're buying solutions or building them from. And you also want to look at, particularly if you build solutions, what framework you put around considering ethics for the solutions. A case in point is Facebook. Facebook did not have an ethics board for AI solutions. And what they decided to do for an experiment was to see if negative posts made people feel more negative. So they used sentiment analysis to rank people's timelines and measure the impact on people. Given that increasing people's feelings of depression can lead to suicide or self-harm or other consequences, they did this without consent and put people at risk. So we need to be thinking about when we're doing things when we're building or buying AI solutions, that we consider these sort of things and we put the appropriate frameworks in place around ourselves to make sure that we do not end up harming people. So, when you're thinking about building or buying AI solutions, either at an individual project level or trying to determine a more strategic approach, you should be thinking about the value that the solution will bring and how that relates to how much it will cost to build or buy the solution. You should think about how artificial intelligence solutions align to whatever approach you're doing. Is the building of it better for building up skills and ability to deliver bespoke capabilities, or is buying it better because it doesn't align to your overall direction? Do you want the intellectual property that comes from building a solution, or do you just want to buy it and get something live? You should be thinking about how you grow your capabilities. If you buy artificial intelligence solutions and implement them primarily with existing software engineers, you might not need to be investing in staff with relevant capabilities. But if you want to start building up solutions, using your own data, using custom bespoke models, then you need to be looking at whether you outsource or hire people to build these solutions and the associated cost with maintaining those staff and probably a growing headcount. And finally, AI is something that should be firmly considered within the two areas of compliance and ethics. Is the solution ethical? And is it compliant both with internal regulations and external regulations? These 6 areas should be part of your business case and considerations when determining whether you should build or buy an AI solution. You may not know all the answers, but asking other people where relevant what the answers are to these questions and areas will really help you arrive at the appropriate answer for your situation. Yes, it really is a big it depends, but hopefully we've given you the framework to get out from it depends to the right answer. So thank you all very much for watching this session. Hopefully you now have some of the considerations in mind for whether you should build or buy AI. You can follow up with me on Twitter and email. Thank you all very much. Speak to you soon. Bye.